Hey everybody, Hunter back again from Showtime Studios. We're going to do part number, I think this is 63 on the build tutorial. And we're going to do a couple of things here today. I'm trying to get this wrapped up and still get some, the final information out there from this start to finish build. And today we're going to be working on, I went ahead and did a panel line, the Tamiya panel line accent color in the grill. It came out pretty good. It gave us a nice depth to the grill and it looks real nice. So real happy with that. And that's the same thing as doing it in a panel line or whatever on the body or something like that. You just put it on, let it flow. I actually did this twice. Let the first coat dry, and then I went back in and did a second coat on it, darkened it up real nice. And then after that, everything was dried up. I shot this down with a coat of TS 79 semi gloss clear, and the sheen of it matches our wheels on the chassis. So the grill is pretty much done. I went ahead and cleaned up a few mold lines and an ejector pin mark that was up in here because when you take the hood off of this model, we have the hood here. You can see the hood lines up with the grill there. It's got these little tabs that center the grill, but then the top of the hood just lays on top of the actual. Well, as soon as I get a hold of it here the right way, there we go. The hood just lays on top of the grill shell. And I went ahead and had to sand across this a little bit. There was a little bit of up and down area. It didn't quite fit exactly the way I wanted it. So I got all that sanded out, got that prepped. It's a nice tight fit now for when you're displaying it with the hood on. So the semi-gloss clear from Tamiya is dry on it. The next thing we're going to do is go in, and since the most of this is exposed, this part up here, this white part that you see, and pretty much from this boss right here up, we're going to paint that black. And we're just going to do it with Vallejo black, and I've got a piece of paper here, and believe it or not, it's another little trick that you can use. This is from a Luden's cough drop. When I had my sinus infection or whatever, I was kind of keeping these cough drops in because it made my throat feel better. And you can use these papers like that for putting paint on, or a lot of different purposes. So normally I hang on to stuff like that, and that way I have it right here at the bench when I need it. And I have, like, I don't know, 15 of them over here. So whenever I need to do a little bit of putting paint on something, I can use this also. Now before, we use something like a piece of plastic card, but plastic is one of them things that if you keep using it for that, you have to buy it. And these cough drops, if you've got them laying around or something like that, now, people will probably come in and say, well, that's got a sticky residue on it or something like that. That might be the case, but it does not affect what we're doing here. Because when I dip the brush in this paint, I'm pretty much dipping from the top of the paint ball, is what I call it. And I'm not even getting down to any close to any of the paint on the paper. So what we're going to do is, we didn't strip the chrome or anything on the inside of this except where the injector pin mark was. And we're just going to go in with our brush. And since this is Vallejo paint, it levels very nicely. I highly recommend this paint for brush use. It works very well. Now, you could go in with the airbrush and do this. That's perfectly fine. I chose not to do it this time around, just to keep things a little bit simpler and do a little bit of brush work. Now, when you're brushing over top of chrome, you have to do more of the dot technique. Or you could go in and strip this chrome, whichever way you wanted to do it. It really doesn't matter. In this case, we're going in and do the dot technique on it. And the reason why I do that is, if you brush it over top of the chrome, sometimes what it wants to do is get the little craters in it. And if you dot it, it doesn't tend to do that. So we're just going to brush a little bit of this on. And like I say, we're just going to get it from this one boss right here up, because everything below that is pretty much hidden with the piece that this attaches to. And then we're also going to go ahead and come up from that point. We're going to come right up through here and get a nice even coat on all of that. And like I say, you may have to go back over this. It just depends on what it looks like when you're done. Um, it's looking pretty decent now, but we'll let it dry and everything and see what it looks like in the end. And if you have any spots that you think it needs a little bit of touch up, just go back over it. And actually, on this particular part, you could go back over it once you have it installed. You could go back and do a couple touch ups if need be. So that gives you a couple options there. And like I say, for you other guys out there, the intermediate builders or whatever, and you have an airbrush, you can very easily go in and spray this with an airbrush. I would probably, if I was doing this for one of my competition builds, I would have sprayed this with an airbrush. But to get the airbrush set up with black in it and come over here and spray at the bench and move the compressor around the corner and all that, it's just too much of a headache. So we're going to do it the old school way. We're going to go in and just brush paint it. And like I say, with this Vallejo paint, a lot of people don't like brush painting. I'm not a big fan of brush painting on a model. But let me tell you this, it depends on your paint also. You can go in and brush this Vallejo on, and it will, once it dries, you do not know that this paint was brushed on. It self-levels very nicely. Very nice product. Can't say enough good things about Vallejo paint. So now we're just going around, and the other thing that I want to do on this is make sure that I get these little areas right back here that centers the hood. Now we're also going to go through and do a little bit of touch up with the Molotow Chrome on this, and where I've sanded across this top area right here, we're going to touch that up with the chrome once we get it mounted to the actual body. Spin this around here, trying to keep my fingers out of this wet paint. And like I say, we're just we're doing these little tabs here now that center the hood. And if you get a little bit of this over onto the flange of the hood there, it's no big deal. It easily comes off, especially with the chrome under it. If you want to get it off, it will come off very easily. And this dries to a nice matte finish, flat finish, whatever you want to call it. Looks very good when it's done, especially in the shadows where this will be. So there we go. That's all we've got to, painting up the hood. Like I say, that stuff self-levels. It'll look very nice when it's done. The camera is not going to pick it up. But that's all there is to that step. Very simple. Like I say, if you wanted to, you could go in and do that with an airbrush. You could tape that off and do it with a spray can if you really wanted to. So that gives you a couple options, but that's just using the Vallejo paint that I really like and highly recommend, and just a simple cheap brush from Michaels. This is the 5.0 brush, worked very good for that. So that part's all wrapped up. We should be done with this drop of paint. I'm going to throw that in the trash can. Next, we're going to move on to, this is something that I showed back in an earlier video. You can see the headlight buckets there. Those were done with the Molotow Chrome, and that was done with the refill. And I just put a little bit on a plastic card, dotted the brush in there, and this is dried for about, I don't know, 4 days, something like that. And it makes a nice chrome reflective backing for the headlights. Looks very good. So, I'm not a big fan of the Molotow Chrome, especially spraying it through an airbrush or anything like that. But it does have its uses in a lot of areas on my models. I have, come to find that there's certain things here and there that it works very well on. So that is one of the areas I think it works well on. Touching up little areas here and there, it works well on. So we're going to go with it. Now, the one thing I did notice is I've been picking this thing up and moving it around. I had the little rear view mirror glued to the dash here, and I'm going to go ahead and pop that off, because somewhere along the line I have touched that. And usually things like this is one of the last things I put on before I put the body on for good. And that way you don't take a chance on it getting touched or anything. So we're just going to pull that off, set that over to the side right now, so I don't knock it off and not notice it and lose it. So we've got the Molotov chrome back in the headlight bezels, and you can do that on any model out there. It'll come out very well. So we're going to go to cleaning up the headlight lenses. And of course, I don't know if we can get a view of this thing. Yeah, there we go. You can see there's kind of a pattern in that headlight lens. You can put that pattern any which way you want to. But the one thing to remember is, like I'm going to lay it right there and say that is exactly the way it's going to set in the model. It looks like a Mercedes emblem is what it looks like. Do that on both sides and make sure that your headlight lenses are straight up and down. Some headlight lenses have the lines in them, and they'll either be vertical or they'll be horizontal. Whichever way you put them in, make sure those lines are straight. Pay attention to that, and just don't put the lens on the end of your finger like this and then stick it into place and let it go. Make sure once you get it into place that you can actually take your finger or the edge of a hobby knife and just kind of move that so you get it centered up and looking good. That's something I see at a lot of the contests, that you'll see a real decent model and you'll look at the headlight lenses on it and they're crooked. It just really throws the model off. So we've got this one cut off. It's already cleaned up. Now we're going to go in and we're going to cut off the next one here. And I just wanted to do this on camera because there's a couple of things you need to watch about clear parts. Clear parts are very brittle, especially when you're cutting them off of the sprue. So I go in, of course, I got my Tamiya cutters here, and I go in not extremely close to the part, but pretty close. Now, what you don't want to do is when you cut into that, you don't want to cut into the surface or the edge of that lens because it will crack it. And some clear plastic is a lot worse than others. And if you happen to go in, just say, for instance, you went in on the first piece and it did crack and you went, oh no, what am I going to do now? You're going to have to figure out something to do with that one piece that you cracked. But you can also go in, if you don't want to use the clippers, you can go in with your hobby knife and you can score right along where it attaches to the headlight lens. Just score it very lightly. And once you get it scored, you can just push the knife down through it. And that will pop that piece out, and you don't take a chance really on cracking the lens. So that's another way that you can do it. And then what I like to do is I'll turn my lens facing toward me the way it's going to be in the vehicle. And I'll come in and make sure that I've got the little nib off of it as good as I can get it with the knife. That's looking pretty good. We got to clean it up a little bit. No big deal though. And then I'll come over on this other side and do the same thing over there. Now what I'm going to do is go in with my blue sand and stick, the light blue side of it, which is a little bit lighter grit. And I'm just going to roll this around the attachment point where it was attached to the sprue very lightly. You don't want to put a flat spot in this or anything. And that takes that off, and it actually gets it prepped for the next stage that we're going to do. And then we're going to turn it around and find the other sprue point. And just very lightly sanding this. You don't want to put a flat spot in it. It's going to ruin your part and make it look kind of goofy looking, so don't do that. And I see a little bit of a flaw right over here on this side, so we're going to do the same thing. I'm actually going to go front to back this time and just kind of roll the stick as I do it. Like I say, this is a very light grit, so it doesn't hurt anything. It will if you're not careful. Okay, we got the lens sanded down now. That lens is, for the most part, pretty much ready to go in. Now, another thing that I like to do on things like this is where that attached to the sprue point. Let me get it turned around here. We attach to the sprue point right there. I like to go in with a piece of like microfiber towel or something like that, and I will take that and slide it back and forth across the towel. Don't be too hard with it, but you got to put a little bit of firm pressure on it. And what that does is that will actually polish your plastic right there where that connection point was, and take out any chances of seeing on the finished model where it was connected to the sprue. So we now have our lenses cleaned up and ready to go into the car. And what we're going to be using to put them in is, of course, the micro crystal clear. You could use white glue for this, which is basically what this is, but I like it. I'm a big fan of the micro crystal clear, so I continue to use it, and I will continue to promote it. It's a very good product. So the next thing that we're going to do is just take a standard old Q-tip, Q-tip, toothpick, and we're going to dip out a little bit of the crystal clear, and then we're going to go in where we want the headlight to mount the lens. And you're trying not to get a whole lot back onto the actual bezel of the kit. What you're trying to do is keep the adhesive into this flange that the lens mounts into, but try to keep your glue off of the reflector cup back in there. So we're going to set that down now. We've got that part. Now we're going to pick up a lens, and we're going to bring the lens up here, and we're going to drop it into place. Now, this is what I was talking about before, is to go in and make sure that that lens is facing the way you want it to face. In this case, we're going to make it look just like the Mercedes emblem. And we're going to make sure that it's straight up and down with this top leg right here. And then we're going to push it back into place to make sure that it's seated. And you may notice that you'll get a little bit of adhesive that gets on the inside of the lens. That's no big deal. This is micro crystal clear. When it dries, it's exactly that. It is crystal clear. Let me see if I can get a view of it here. There's what the lens looks like once we installed it. Looks very nice, and you can notice I turned it up and made it look just like the Mercedes emblem. So now we're going to do the same thing again. And I've already got that other lens cleaned up that was laying down there, so it's ready to go. We're going to get a little bit of adhesive on the toothpick, not a lot. And you don't need much adhesive for little parts like this. This is something that isn't going to get touched. And especially with the way these recess, you should be good to go. Very little adhesive. Now, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to pick up that lens. Now, you could do this with a pair of tweezers if you want to. There's nothing wrong with that. Of course, I've already done my take on using tweezers on a model, and I don't do a whole lot of it. So now I'm just going to go in, and we're going to scoot that lens around very carefully. You don't want to scratch your paint. You don't want to scratch the lens. And we want to get that centered up. Now, what I'm trying to do now is get the hobby knife right underneath the edge of it so that I can pick it up a little bit. We'll get a hold of it here in a second. There we go. I wanted to pick that up a little bit so I could shift it over and get it centered where I want it to go. And like I say, whenever you introduce the hobby knife into a final step like this, you have to be very careful because you're taking a chance on the knife slipping and going across your paintwork. You don't want that. That's bad. I've done it more than once. Take it from me. It's bad. And this one here just doesn't want to center up at all. I'm struggling with this one. Tell you the truth, what I may have to do with this one, believe it or not, what am I looking for here? I'm looking for those things called tweezers. I don't use them very often. There they are. We are going to go in with a pair of tweezers on this because this lens does not want to sit in the way that I want it to, and it's starting to aggravate me. And it just about flew across the room right there because it jumped up out of the groove. It's amazing sometimes how much time you can spend on the simplest parts. You can put a very in-depth assembly together in, it seems like, no amount of time at all, and you get to something as simple as a headlight lens, and trying to get them exactly where you want them, they are a pain. But we are looking pretty good now. Let me see what we got here. Yeah, we're looking real good with that. So what we're going to do is, once we get them set exactly where we want them, in the case of this, they're kind of tunneled a little bit. So we're going to push them back into the opening and make sure that they're down and seated real well. And there you go. We have the headlight lenses installed in the car. Good to go. Finally, let them dry, and then I'm going to show you another little trick to make them look a little bit better when we're done. It's a trick that I've been using for a while. It really gives them a nice shadow effect, and it's a very nice finished product. So that's what we have on that. And you all got to see me sit there and fight with a component. And like on my super detail builds and things like that, I do a whole lot of fighting with components. So we're going to set that over to the side. Now we're going to bring the body back over, because the next thing I want to do on the body is I want to go through my glass install procedure. I've already got the front windshield in. It's totally installed, glued in, dry. We're going to put the tinted glass in the back window. So, of course, you got these little tabs here that need to come off. So, again, go in, be very careful with your snippers and clip that off. Now, remember on this style glass that this edge here is not 100% critical, because the actual glass is here in the center. This is just a mounting lip around here. But what I like to do is still go in and clean that up and get it, you know, as clean as you can get it without spending a whole lot of time with it. Just lightly go around it and sand it. I've switched over to the little bit heavier blue side of the stick here, and we're just rolling any mold line or any rough edge or anything like that off of it. No big deal. And what we're going to do next is we're going to set that into the body, and we're going to check the fit of that actual part where it's supposed to go. So we're going to look at it here and see if it looks the way we want it to look. And actually, it looks pretty good. It doesn't look too bad at all. The glass in this kit is a little thick. I'm not real happy with the thickness of it, but it's a box stock build. You could go in and sand the glass and polish it all back out, but on this particular build, we are not going to do that this time around. Normally, if I'm doing a box stock build for the competitions, I would go in and sand the glass down. Now, one thing that I did notice on this is when I set it in place, it's not going all the way back in place, because this flange right here is actually taller than the flange opening in the body. So what I'm going to do, now you can do this with a sanding stick, and if you're a beginner or whatever, I would recommend you come in with a sanding stick and sand this down. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in with the cutters, and I'm going to very lightly take just a little bit of that flange off. I'm going to take about half of that flange off. And now we're going to sand that down. Just like that, just to smooth it out so you don't have any real sharp edges on it. Now we're going to fit the glass up in here again and see if it sets in here a little bit better than it did before. And we are looking, yeah, we're looking pretty good. Like I say, it's not as good as I want it to be. I would go in, actually on this, I would go in and cut a lot of material off of this glass and make it thinner. But I think for what we got right there, it's working pretty good. So we're going to go with that. It's up to you on how much time you want to spend, fitting stuff like that. Like I say, on this particular build, this is not a 100% competition build. I'm kind of, cutting a few corners here and there. It'll still be a decent model when it's done, but, it's not my typical competition work. So we just dipped the toothpick back in the crystal clear. What I'm going to do now is go around this flange that's on the inside of the body, and I'm going to lay down a bead of crystal clear all the way around that flange. You don't want to put a ridiculous amount down in here, but you want to make sure that you have a full bead all the way around it, because what that's going to do is give your glass something to set into. And with a full bead, it also, when you're done, will somewhat simulate a gasket. Because as you put with this style glass and the way that it mounts, as you push it into place, it's going to want to squeeze out a little bit. And that's good, because what that'll do is it'll also help fill in any small gaps. And this glass does have some small gaps in it. It will help fill that in when you push it into place. And when it dries, it's crystal clear. So it looks just like the glass, even though it's glue. So we've got that glued up now. We got the a glue bead all the way around there. So I'm going to hold the body like this, and I'm going to take my glass. I'm going to slide it. It's laying on my fingers just like that. I'm going to take it, sight down through the opening there, and we are going to set that into place. And then we are going to push that with a little bit of pressure into the body. And if it squeezes out and gets on your fingers or whatever on the inside of the glass, don't worry about it. It's no big deal. Now, if you're trying to use a super glue or something like that, I would not use super glue to begin with. Super glue and clear parts do not get along. Super glue and tinted parts do not get along. So, I'm recommending this glue because I trust it. It works. I know what it'll do. But if you're trying to put glass in with regular model glue or liquid adhesive or something like that, this whole step is not for you, because it's a totally different procedure, and you risk doing damage to the glass where the crystal clear you will not. Now, if you look real close right here, and I don't know if we can get the camera to zoom in on it. Yeah, there it is. Right there in that corner, you can see a little bead of glue that squeezed out. Now, what you want to do with that is you want to leave that and let it dry. And then once it dries, you're going to come in with a toothpick. You can wet it down if you want to, and just very lightly roll that, and it will come right up off that glass, and you won't see it. But what it's doing is it's filling in that little bit of a gap back in there. That's why it came around the corner and got out here toward this, what's actually the visible part of the glass. And you won't have any issues with it. You just wipe it off. It'll look real good. The glass will be sturdy, set in place real nice. And the other thing that you're doing is you created a nice smooth bead all the way around the inside of the window. So when we paint that, it'll look a whole lot better than just painting it and sticking the glass to the paint. So there we go. We have the glass in now. We have the headlight lenses in now. And that's all for this tutorial. We're up here about a half an hour. So I want to get this one cut off. We have the grill over here. It's drying up. It'll be ready to go here real soon. So in the next video, we'll probably go ahead and get this glued in, place where it goes. And we still need to bring the airbrush over. Believe it or not, we got to spray some black on the underside of the hood. And we're also going to be spraying some black on the underside of the body. And we'll do that on video. So that'll be coming up after this one. I'll have to get the airbrush and everything over here. And remember that when you're doing these steps, up toward the end like this, you're going to get fingerprints on your body. Try to make sure that, like with the crystal clear, if you got a little bit of residue, it comes right off. If you're using a Tamiya extra thin or anything like that on the final detail parts, be very careful, that you don't get any of that on your fingers and touch the paint, because liquid adhesives will kill the paint. Super glues will kill the paint. But the crystal clear stuff like that, it will not hurt the paint. It'll wipe right off. And same thing with this here. We have a couple little, well, actually, we got a whole lot of little fingerprints on it. I got some smears across the top there. No big deal. All we do with that is we can come in with a little bit of the #1 Novus, drop it into place just like that. A couple drops is all you need, nothing special. You take your piece of microfiber towel, you very lightly go across it, the whole surface of the car. And this would be something that, you can do in between, just to make sure you're keeping most of the crud off of the finish. But then you'll do it for a final time once you get the car finished and the body and everything is mounted. Then you would do this for a final time. So you don't have to get it exactly perfect during these stages, because we will be picking the body up again and, of course, getting fingerprints back on it again. But we're just smoothing that Novus #1 around. And as you can see, that's what we got. I mean, it's super shiny. A lot of people were worried about the scratches from a piece of cloth. As you can see, that is my overhead light assembly up there, and it is a true reflection of it. These two bands right here, if you look real close, it looks like a light assembly. That's because that is the light assembly that's up in the center of the hobby room. It is an LED assembly, and you can see the whole thing, and that's probably 8 feet away from this model. So there you go. So hopefully you picked up some tricks from that. We're getting up to the end of the series. So that's all we've got for this video. We'll come back. We'll start spraying some black paint on the undersides of things, and then we'll be moving on to doing the exhaust and a couple little odds and ends. And this series is just about done. So if you have any questions or concerns, leave me a comment on the video. Again, I want to thank everybody for watching and all the support of the series. And stay tuned. We'll be right back with another video. Bye-bye for now.